Good morning. Good morning. I'm grateful to be here. I want to thank Mary for surprising me with an invitation to participate in this morning's Recovery Eucharist. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maggie Simpson. Some of you know me as Lynn Simpson and Pete Simpson's daughter, which is a very delightful and fun thing to be. I grew up around Wyoming, Jackson, Casper, Sheridan, Laramie, but I have come home to Cody all my life, and I feel very blessed and lucky to have a kind and generous and loving extended family here. So far this morning, we've heard 3 of AA's 12 steps. If I was attending an AA meeting, and I was to introduce myself, instead of all that I just said, I would simply say, "Hi, I'm Maggie and I'm an alcoholic." I might add, and my sobriety date is March 19th, 2002, and for that I am extremely grateful. I have been appreciating this story that we just heard of the Good Samaritan. I have some thoughts on it, but I want to come back to that in a minute. I have a couple of things I'd like to say about addiction and recovery. There is so much to say about addiction and recovery. There is so much that I could say personally about my 20 years struggling with addiction, alcohol, tobacco, body image, food, as well as about what I have learned in my 20 years in recovery, which I owe to AA. Smoke-free, healthy, sober. Gabor Mate, a Canadian leader in the global developmental trauma and collective trauma movements, writes in his book on addiction that addiction is at first and at its core an effort toward an attempt for pain management. One of my hats is as a certified Enneagram teacher, and for those of you who are wondering, Enneagram, E-N-N-E-A-G-R-A-M, which is fast finding its way into the recovery movements. Now, briefly, what the Enneagram is it's a spiritual and psychological growth-based, it's a tool, it's a growth-based tool, and its purpose is for examining how each of 9 different personality styles, one of which each of us favors, unconsciously limits our capacity to inhabit, where it separates us from the full range of God's gifts that we have been blessed with to bring into this world. So the work in the Enneagram has been described as examining the 9 ways we fall from grace, or the 9 ways that we believe unconsciously in our own separateness. The good thing is that the Enneagram also offers us a way that we might each best find our way back home. And in the Enneagram world, we look at these fixed, rigid, habituated aspects of our personality styles, what ultimately keeps us stuck and repeating the same thing over and over again, as a kind of complex pain management system. What that tells us, oddly enough, is that we find ourselves separate from God, from one another, from ourselves, as the result of a pain management system that we employ to deal with our feelings of separateness. Psychiatrist Dr. David Daniels writes that when we are confronted with someone's defenses, they're acting out their behavioral issues, resistance, withholding, lashing out, escaping, avoidance, shutting down, addiction, we are looking directly at their pain. The pain they are all talking about is the pain of this separateness, exile, internal isolation, the pain of feeling profoundly different, unfit for human consumption. The feeling of having no intrinsic value to others, no place, not being able to find our way home. Some succumb to it, some overcompensate for it. I'd like to share a definition from AA with you that has meant a lot to me. This is from a well-known AA historian and what we call a circuit speaker. 30 years ago, his name is Clancy Imisley. 30 years ago, Clancy defined AA this way. Alcoholics Anonymous is one alcoholic sitting down and talking to another alcoholic to reduce his feelings of difference enough that he might take steps in which he does not yet believe. We're reading those steps here this morning. I'd like to say that again and embellish a little bit. Alcoholics Anonymous is one alcoholic sitting down, talking to another alcoholic in a manner of acceptance and welcome and openness and familiarity and ease, so as to reduce his feelings of difference, separateness, alienation, isolation, enough that he might be willing to take some steps on his own behalf in which he cannot or does not yet believe. So, coming back to the story of the Good Samaritan, through the lens of my 20 years of struggle with addiction and recovery and my 20 years of continuous sobriety, I hear in this story a story of a man traumatized, robbed, beaten, scary looking, separated, othered in the way we speak these days, and left half dead on the side of the road. I also hear a story of two men, two who were surely good men, intending to do right, adhering to principles and teachings well intended to affect a proper righteousness and goodness in which they deeply believed, but which also caused them to separate from the full fabric of God's creation, separate through their perceptions, fears, worries, certitudes. I hear a story of two decent men who turn away, other, devalue, discard their own, the scary looking and the broken and the perhaps dangerous aspects of themselves in this beaten creature on the side of the road, so as to preserve their own dignity, security, purity, and perhaps even their own safety. And this is understandable. Then I hear a story of a man that represents an essential kind of inner security, connectedness, courage, faith, vulnerability. A man with just enough humility to recognize his sameness with this broken, half-dead, robbed being on the side of the road and offer compassionate action on his behalf. This simple story of the Good Samaritan resonates deeply with what I've learned over these past 20 years about addiction and recovery. Not just as an addict or alcoholic, but as a human being, recovering from the way that I am addicted to my personality traps and trances, defenses, judgments, preferences, or my sins, if you will, the flesh. I hear a story of the need we all have to recognize and tend to where we feel separate within ourselves, where we find a part of ourselves beaten and alone on the side of the road. We all have them. I also hear in this story an invitation to compassionately recognize the way that the pain of my own internal separateness can express as dismissing, judging, othering, and isolating someone else. This story reminds me of how compassionate action on behalf of other people is indeed how I recognize their pain, reduce their feelings of difference, and how I tend to my own separateness. Working with others is one of the cornerstones of recovery in AA. We recognize that we are each other's good Samaritans, and that our mutual recovery depends on our not leaving each other beat up on the side of the road, no matter what other differences we may have. We reduce those feelings of essential difference so that we may take steps together on behalf of our shared recovery. When I look around at our world today, I can't help but think that our recovery depends on our not leaving each other beaten up on the side of the road. Perhaps in this story, we are being asked to reduce the feelings of difference, the essential difference, enough that we might take steps, compassionate action, together on behalf of our shared recovery. In AA's nearly 90 years, it has been our offering to one another as Good Samaritans. And it has been our